Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our July webinar for the US Biochar Coalition. We greatly appreciate your engagement. I'm Maureen Walsh, the Executive Director of the USBC, and today we're hosting what I consider a really interesting and critical conversation about the intersection of two rapidly evolving industries, industrial hemp and biochar. A few quick housekeeping notes before we dive into our session. We do record all of our sessions, and this will be available to USBC members. So if you're not able to attend live, or if you are able to attend live, but you want other team members to be able to have availability to this, please just reach out and we will get that recording to you. We also will have the ability to do some question and answer at the end of our presentation, about the last 15 minutes. So if you would put your Q&A in the bottom of the screen, we'll get to them during our Q&A block. We'll kind of cluster them all together. Housekeeping over. So I just want to frame the topic a little bit for our audience. We really think at USBC that industrial hemp and biochar represent a natural synergy. Biochar is able to turn waste into high value carbon, and to utilize the biochar for soil health, utilizing the hemp for phytoremediation, and converting that leftover biomass via pyrolysis. These techniques help build a strong circular economy and very good, durable carbon solutions. So today we are really lucky to have three industry leaders. They are members of the USBC, and I was so excited when they joined our coalition. So let me briefly introduce them. We're joined today by Sully Sullivan, who is the Executive Director of the Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona, otherwise known as HITA, and the Executive Director of the National Hemp Association, NHA. He brings an unmatched national and regional perspective on policy alignment, supply chain growth, and industry integration. We also have Laura Franklin, who is the Director of Operations for the Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona. She works on the front lines of expanding industrial hemp markets, streamlining supply chains, and integrating sustainable land use practices. And then we're also joined by Russ Peterson. He is the Director of Carbon and Strategic Initiatives at Indie Hemp. He leads Indie Hemp's market expansion around carbon markets, industrial bioproducts, and practical biochar integration for commercial hemp processing. So to kick us off, I'd love to give our panelists about a minute to tell us where your work currently intersects between the industrial hemp world and biochar. And I'll go in the order of introduction. So I'll put the baton in Sully's hands first.
All right, thanks, Maureen, and thank you, and thank you to USBC for having us on today's call. We're really excited to be members and allied associations with USBC and help to push forward this intersection of biochar and hemp. Like Maureen said, I'm Sully Sullivan. I'm the executive director of, we call it HITA, H-I-T-A. Some call it HITA. It's tomato, 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 tomato. So Hemp Industry Trade Association of Arizona. We've been a trade association for about 10 years. We're very active legislatively in Arizona. We've written hemp regulation omnibus bills. We lobbied down at the Capitol to protect hemp. And we do all kinds of things an association would do. So things like webinars and in-person networking events to really bring together the Arizona hemp community. I'm also, for the last 5 years, a council member of the Arizona Department of Agriculture's Industrial Hemp Advisory Council, where my job there is to help advise the Arizona Department of Ag on how to grow, sustain, and protect the Arizona hemp industry. Like Maureen mentioned, I recently took a position as executive director of the National Hemp Association, where my activities are very similar to HITA's, but at the national level. And so at the NHA, we're working on hemp regulation as well to help unlock the industrial hemp crop once and for all. And so kind of to speak on the intersection between biochar and hemp, From the hemp perspective, what we need as an industry is clear policy, clear regulation. We do have regulation and policy in the sense of the 2018 Farm Bill did legalize industrial hemp to be grown. All kinds of things have happened since then. New industries have come out in the hemp space outside of industrial hemp for fiber and grain, like hemp beverages, for example, that really need to be regulated so we can finally, once and for all, unlock the industrial hemp crop for fiber and grain and remove the unnecessary regulatory barriers that prevent the traditional farmer of soy or cotton or corn from growing industrial hemp. So I feel like we're on the precipice of that. As early as the coming next year or two, we should hopefully have that regulation in place that allows that traditional farmer to grow hemp for industrial reasons, which is where we get to biochar. So there's so much to unlock in the intersection of biochar and hemp, and we're really excited to be a part of that research and that policy and that whole push. So thanks again, Maureen, for having us.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I am sure you're not surprised to hear us echo that clear policy and regulations and legislation that help incentivize the utilization of these industries is so absolutely necessary. And so we really look forward to continuing our connection and our engagement with you guys as we move forward in this process. So Laura, I'll put the baton in your hands for just, a quick intro about, where you see kind of like the intersection of these two industries coming together.
Yes, thank you. Also, I echo the same as Sully. Thank you for having us. This is a huge opportunity for us to collaborate in such a bigger way. There are, as Sully was saying, a lot of obstacles still, and we cannot ignore that. We still need to, educate those things. But for me, the intersection between industrial hemp and biochar is really about research, partnerships, building, the missing pieces of the supply chain. And HEDA, we hold an Arizona hemp license for research, and we're developing collaborative fieldwork around water conservation, soil health, seed and fiber production, and our role, with hemp in soil remediation. That's a huge one for us, as well as water in the desert here. Biochar is a natural extension of that work because it allows us to work beyond the primary crop and ask how residual biomass can become useful in soil amendments and durable carbon material and, for other industrial applications. Arizona is an important place to test that connection. Water is really limited here. Our soil can be challenging, but we are expert at farming in this climate, and we have a unique, ecosystem where we can actually continually grow throughout the year, unlike some of these other areas. So seed propagation seems a really, viable option here for even other locations that want to grow hemp. So, we're looking to, have the Southwest be a strong support for the rest of the country and potentially the world. So we're looking for, industry partners so that we can measure what works and build practical systems around that across our state and the rest of the country. So that's kind of how that all relates to us.
Perfect. All right, Russ, I'm going to put the baton in your hand now. A little bit about the intersection of industrial hemp and biochar. And remember, you and I did basically have 2 hour long conversations. So I know you can talk about this, but let's package it in a small little package, and then we'll get into a bigger meal as we go through our presentation.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely appreciate and echo the sentiments of the USBC and all the good work that you guys are doing. Absolutely love all the conversations that we've had. So we're I&D Hemp. We are located in Fort Benton, Montana. We are vertically integrated oilseed and fiber. We do decortication. So we're on both sides of the plant. I lead I&DH Carbon, our carbon business unit. Two things that put us at the intersection. First, we generate the feedstock. Our decortication line produces residual material that has no value, no high value home today as far as that waste stream. We call it a co-product. And second, we already run a carbon program. So I head up the soil organic carbon under Vera's VM0042 methodology out of Montana and within the Golden Triangle region. Biochar is definitely a different animal. And we are working in kind of the applied validation, not production at this point, feedstock characterization through a couple of different partners and vendor nuanced work that we're doing right now.
Awesome. Well, I feel like you teed me up really, really well to move on to our first kind of topic of discussion. I'm looking at this as a meal, and this is we're gonna set the table here. And our first topic is going to be processing hemp residuals into biochar. So for our audience, I'm hopeful that that this is somewhat understood. That processing, hemp fiber production leaves a lot of volumes of stock hurd and other waste, and turning those low value or no value co-products into biochar is a, hopefully not only an economic win, but also an environmental win. So Russ, why don't we stay with you? You talked about managing carbon and those strategic initiatives at Indie Hemp, and that you're, looking at processing those residuals. What do your logistics look like? What are the practical logistics and feedstock characteristics of converting industrial hemp into commercial biochar?
Yeah, so I definitely think kind of taking the characteristics first is, hemp isn't one feedstock. The woody core of the plant behaves like a soft hardwood. It's lignin rich, chars well, has good fixed carbon yield. The bast behaves radically different with a high cellulosic straw component. It devolatilizes more, less char. It wants more thermal severity.
Mm,
So our decortication output is a moving blend of both. And it drifts with different agronomic practices. It drifts with retting, crop year, line settings, different varietals, screen performance across all of the changes that we're pivoting and working through as kind of different end use applications come to light. And so it's also, it's not a wood chip, right? So we don't spec a unit off of a single composite sample. And right now we're characterizing 5 different streams in analysis through a company in Austria as well as the Montana. We work with Montana Tech to do the characterization and pyrolysis as well. Now, on the logistics side, obviously everybody here is probably pretty aware bulk density governs everything. So our fibrous residues, they're extremely bulky per unit of carbon. So whole economics fall apart fast, which is really good because in our case, we're trying to valorize the co-location and looking at, does this make sense? We're a processor, right? So we already have growers that haul to us, scales, receiving contracts all exist. So our decortication residue never gets hauled at all. That's a cost that's eliminated. It's not necessarily optimized by any means. And so we are looking at also modeling other ag residues as part of the fact that logistics from our growers, they're already bringing things to us. We already have established trucking routes and all of the nuances that go into, we have a pretty firm understanding. So that doesn't discount, though, acquisition costs of those other ag residues, competing
yeah.
uses.
What
Um,
primary ag residues are you also looking at, as well as
so right
hemp
now we're also
residues?
mapping, barley and wheat residues as well. In some cases, the additionality counterfactual is a good majority of the growers in our region are potentially burning some of that as well.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty good use case. And then, of course, we're modeling all of that across the value chain from not only carbon credits, but then also what does it look like into end use applications.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what that intersection of the other additional ag residues looks like. Obviously, it depends upon physically where you are as to what the farmers are primarily engaged in. And obviously, Montana's agricultural outlook looks different than certainly, Arizona's agricultural outlook. So why don't we bounce back to Arizona? And I'll throw this out for either Sully or Laura, or maybe both of you. So from an association and operations standpoint at the Hemp Industry Association of Arizona, how are you looking at building those reliable supply chains so that hemp processors and pyrolysis facility operators can interface seamlessly? Are you seeing integrated projects, or are you seeing where people are, bringing it to a pyrolysis facility? It would be very, I have a tendency to think that a lot of biochar projects are very bespoke simply because we have different feedstocks and we have different technologies that are processing it. But I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you're seeing specifically in Arizona.
Sure, yeah, I can take a crack at that first, Laura, if that's okay. So, all right, sounds good. So what are we doing? So you were asking to sort of build that. So two different things really. So policy, legislation, getting good policy passed, and then doing research to get the information needed that farmers can take and that research to be able to grow crops successfully out here in Arizona. So I mentioned before in my introduction that policy and insensible regulation is sort of an issue right now in the hemp industry. I'll touch on that very quickly, which is right now a traditional farmer of like again cotton or soy or corn, for them to grow industrial hemp, unlike any other crop, they have to get their fingerprints taken. They have to do a background check. They can't have any kind of a felony, things that nothing else, no other crop is required to grow. And not only that, the sort of big kicker here is if their plants test out of compliance, they have to burn their whole crop. Now, that's different implications here for biochar. Biochar offers a unique answer here. If a crop does go non-compliant, it can be burned and used for biochar. But from a farmer's perspective, when they hear that they have to do all these hoops and also they might have to kill their crop, they're not interested. And so policy
Right.
legislation is the huge part as an association for us to get that right to, as I say, unlock industrial hemp once and for all by removing those unnecessary hoops to jump through. And then research, I think Laura can touch on this a bit more than I can, but just a sort of 30,000 foot view. So in Arizona, we don't know how to grow hemp out here, right? We've been growing since 2019, and we've learned a lot of data on how to grow hemp out here, but it's mostly just anecdotal, right? We don't have university based research, for example, and so the one of the things that HEDA focuses on is that research. So as Laura mentioned, I don't want to take too much of her talking points on this, but just to overview, HEDA has the only research license with the Arizona Department of Ag. And so we're doing that research with some state universities, UC Berkeley, University of Arizona. We're working with the Department of Ag on that. And really the point of that research is manyfold, really, but for the most part, it's to gather the data that we need on how to successfully grow industrial hemp for fiber and grain out here in Arizona, which includes, watering techniques, different soil techniques and planting. We're using AI to study the subsurface activity at the root level there. And so that's really, research and policy is a big thing that we're doing out here and to get the market set up and the supply chain set up. And as you mentioned, Maureen, kind of how are we doing this and that right now? Well, it can't be done right now. There really isn't any hemp growing in Arizona for the most part. For example, back in 2019, when the hemp industry had its first season here in Arizona, there was about 3,500 acres of hemp registered with the Department of Ag. Today, about 150 acres. That
Oh,
sounds
wow.
crazy, but we see that
Yeah.
in other states as well. And that has a lot to do with the regulation and with the lack of knowledge on how to grow it. A lot of farmers tried to grow it the first season, didn't know exactly how to, which is understandable. We don't have data on that. And so a lot of crops failed or went non-compliant, and farmers just began to move on to something else. And so really the
Right.
goal of HEDA is we want to show farmers the truth, which is hemp is an excellent rotational crop to add into their crop rotations of, again, corn or soy or what have you, that actually helps their soil. So we mentioned the remediation of the soil, helps to remove the heavy metals and pesticides and things from previous crops, but it also adds other things into the soil. So part of our research, and I'll stop right after this so Laura can take this on, because I don't want to deep dive into our research and let her touch on that. But for example, in our research, we're testing different crop rotation styles. And so we're trying I think if I say the crops right, we're trying barley, hemp, and chickpea as a rotation. The barley gives something that the hemp likes, potassium or nitrogen. I have that technical portion off. I'm sure Russ and Laura know. The hemp gives something that chickpea likes. Chickpea gives something that the barley likes, and have a whole rotation there. So collecting that data so we can be able to say to farmers in Arizona, here's the data from the universities. Here's the data from HEDA's research. Here's how you grow it. Here's what you don't do. Here's what you do. And from there, I think, in addition to all of that, with getting the policy passed, both in DC and Arizona, to remove those barriers for for your traditional farmer. Now we're cooking with biochar and hemp, at least here in Arizona.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I feel like you guys really work well together because you completely and utterly teed up Laura to talk a little bit about some of that research because as you so clearly stated, right, you can go into policymakers and ask for something, but if you don't have data and information like qualified third-party information, hopefully, a land grant university backing up your claims you should get nowhere, right? Because essentially you're selling word time and not actual information. So, Laura, anything to add to Sully's baton toss to you?
Some he covered a lot there, which is great. Without going too deep into the research or anything, because we're really in the beginning stages of that. I know that Russ and his team has done years of research up there in Montana's area and across the globe, actually. I think they're more involved than people might know, which is exciting to have folks who have actually done the research and done trials. So we'd like to mimic that down here, like Sully said, with the acreages that weren't grown. I think that and maybe everybody on this call already knows this, but there are different varietals of hemp. So there's floral varietals, which are kind of a short, and I call them fat and juicy plants that you squeeze out for the hemp oil, which is not the seed oil, but it's for, wellness products typically. Some, polymers and different things for resin that people are looking into now for manufacturing, but primarily that's seen as wellness. And so a lot of folks grew that thinking they could use that same biomass to build homes, houses, use for biochar and things like that. And the reality is it doesn't pencil the same way. It doesn't sequester the carbon the same way. The plants are uniquely have unique properties. And when you're talking about the biomass left over from fiber and grain processing, it's different than CBD processing and those floral varietals. So just to put that out there, the majority of the plants grown in the United States the first few years of the Farm Bill passing was CBD hemp, and that's floral varietal hemp. So not the same as what we're really trying to do now. And that the reason for that was we didn't have stable genetics in most of the regions because it had been illegal to grow it. So we had to stabilize the genetics. So most states went and stabilized, CBD genetics, and now we're in the fiber and grain side. So we're trying to, in some ways, catch up to some of the other, opportunities with fiber and grain, but our policies have not. So that's for us, it's hard to get banking and insurance and things like that for traditional farming. So we are definitely focused on doing that. And we do have several farm partners and university partners who are helping us with these trials. We want to open that up for others to participate and to know that we're really scratching the surface on what this plant can do. And when Sully keeps saying unlocking, that's really what he means is we really need to focus on the fiber and grain side of things now that we understand what the wellness products can do and those things, and focus more in all the other. We were working on a hard carbon project. That's what kind of led us to the biochar conversation because that's the waste material of creating hard carbon. And, that bass fiber is harder to come by. So our trials focused on how can we get deeper roots in the soil, hold on to water, do a wonderful cover crop for the summers out here, keep the soil alive, hold on to water. And so that we just have more water really. And biochar really helps us do that. You have to be we absolutely have to do more testing. So I really push that. That's where we're at right now. So
Well, you set me up perfectly for our next kind of block of our conversation. And what I'd love to do is focus a little bit more on doing just that, returning that biochar to the soil and showing, the improved agronomic tendencies, whether it's water retention or nutrient efficiency, increasing the soil organic matter, et cetera. So Laura, could you tell me a little bit more about what your data is showing about applying hemp-derived biochar back into those agricultural soils? How does it perform in those arid soils like Arizona, where you're so concerned? Well, we're concerned, period, across the United States with water retention. But how does it compare to dry land farming in the West if you're adding biochar to those arid soils?
Well, I wish I was the foremost expert in that topic, but I do know anecdotally that our soils are really salty. And if you just add biochar to dry soil, it's actually going to rob the soil of its nutrients. It's going to rob it of its water or have the water just pass through it. So we really have to do more research from that perspective. We do have members who are in the soil industry specifically, so we know that they're doing biochar additions to their soil. So that's how we're seeing it being used. I do think that for large scale commercial farming, especially in Arizona, we do need to do things responsibly. So we don't just say, hey, here's a great, cool new thing. Let's try this out. But we look at it for not only soil health, but we have a lot of fires here, and there
Yeah.
are opportunities to stop, the fires. We have a lot of Superfund sites. We have really contaminated soils in some areas, and so the remediation portion of that for us, and helping bring the soil's health back, is how we would want to use that. But again, it's because of the alkaline, sensitivities that we're still researching. So I don't know if that's the answer you wanted, but that is what we have now. So
No, I mean,
I don't want to sell it as an end all be all,
yeah,
but
you guys are involved in a long-term conversation, right? And that's, I mean, that's a lot of what the biochar industry is doing as well. There's some research that's being done right now on utilizing biochar basically as a almost like a fire break or a fire retardant in
yeah.
soils because it helps to retain that moisture and especially when you have structures that you're wanting to protect in a fire prone area, including mixing it in as a part of your soils will give you that additional boost. What we're hoping is we can actually quantify that through research and perhaps
Mhm.
work with insurance companies to encourage this practice. Quite frankly, encouraging the practice writ large because like look in the United States right now, we've got Canada on fire. We've got significant fires in the west of the United States and in the southeast this past year there was a lot of fire damage. So and biochar can help with that flip side as well with processing the residual charred wood that is left over, getting that biochar back into the soils, hopefully helping with soil remediation, etc. So there's a lot to be dug in there, and I think in October of this year we're gonna have a little bit more of a conversation around those specific issues with biochar. But getting back to the hemp conversation, um, Russ, I wanted to ask you a question about, working with actual farmers. How do we position this economic narrative to convince a grower to cultivate both hemp and apply that biochar to their acreage afterwards? Are you actually having some of those conversations to date, or is this a little bit of a preview of things that you're going to be doing in the future?
Yeah, I think it's a preview, to be straightforward and honest with where we're at. We're going through the process of really truly understanding where and how does biochar even fit, specifically for us, right? And that entails us characterizing everything. Just as I kind of mentioned before, we have multiple different co-products that we have to understand how does it pyrolyze and what are the,
Right.
application potential of that. And then from that point, we need to understand how it behaves in the soil. So Laura just did a really good job of kind of giving that context. So in our mind, what we've already had to do with industrial hemp, from since the 2016, 2018 tiny hemp, is we've had to educate agronomically seed varietals across the board. And then of course you bring in the regulatory components and
Yep.
everything that Sully had talked to. It's some people are like, you guys masochists or what, right? But now we're adding biochar to that conversation.
Right.
So what we need to understand is, the entry point for us isn't carbon, even though we have, our carbon portfolio in our business unit. It's more or less along the lines of fertilizer. And, growers in our region are feeling the input costs, as we all know what's going on. And that's the live conversation that we're having today. So it's like nutrient efficiency, water retention are what a grower buys. Everything that just Laura was just talking about, and how do we valorize that? So not only get use cases that are within and around the region so that they can look at their neighbors or universities that are actually doing it. Is it being supported by the USDA? Is it being supported by major groups, right? And that's going to
Yep.
give them a little bit of credibility. And then, of course, it's looking at the accumulation over the years as well. So it's a
Yeah.
regional use case, are the requirements. And we've run this playbook before with industrial hemp. So we have to get it into rotation and it's a hard lift. But once a grower works with us, once they understand the benefits of industrial hemp, its carbon sequestration capabilities, how it helps follow on yields and everything, they buy in. And now it's, is biochar part of that conversation? Does it help their rotations? And that's really where it's anchored.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Sully, I'd love to ask you a little bit of a question on kind of some of the regulatory frameworks. And this is, from your experience, probably more on the national level. How are carbon markets or USDA programs like EQIP or voluntary carbon removal credits? How are they playing a role in offsetting any type of upfront costs of biochar application for hemp producers? Are they playing right now, or is this future casting as well?
I think this is future casting as well, and
Okay.
I'm not an expert in the sort of QUIP programs in USDA and some of those things, so I don't want to talk out of the side of my mouth there. But I can say future casting is very much sort of, I guess, I like the term that you put there, is sort of the name of the game in the hemp industry in many ways, because again, we're right there on the precipice of getting legislation passed to really, I keep using the word, unlock our industry. Because, you touched on marine as well, like insurance and baking and things like that. So that's very hard for a hemp farmer. Well, let's just call it just a traditional farmer, period. It's hard for a farmer
Right.
to get any kind of crop insurance for hemp or even a bank account sometimes if they're doing something with hemp. We have our head farmer in our research project let his insurance company know that he's doing research with us, and they were not happy to hear he was doing anything with hemp, even though it's federally legal and all those kinds of things. So the type of normal crop protections and government programs that are available to a lot of different crops are not the case with hemp. It's considered a specialty crop, but even so, then even though it's more of a row crop, but even so, uh, specialty crop things that the government offers with the USDA, for example, for specialty crops, hemp is still excluded from that list for different reasons. So
Yeah.
we really are future casting in a lot of ways because although we've got so many components ready to go, farmers who are ready to get the data to be able to add a new rotational crop into their rotation. We've got folks like IND Hemp doing the research, doing the work to sort of be ready, And so that's really kind of where we are. So that as far as like QUIP and USDA, it's future casting for the hemp industry in some ways from my point of view, but Rusty and Laura might have a different view.
Rusty, any commentary on that?
No, I mean, just you said it pretty well, Sully, and it's one of those things where it's always changing and we're always pivoting in this space because it's industrial hemp. And then secondarily, it's just regulatory across the board. And then how do you talk about it as well, right?
Yeah.
But it's very bipartisan. That's the nice thing is we like to say it's purple, right? Because it blends
Yeah.
both red and blue, right? So in that case, we appease both sides, right? And that's the beauty of this is if we can really educate and put that out there, it should make that job of the lobbyist and what Sully and Laura are doing a lot easier. But again, it's challenging up until those points until you get the strict data that's needed, right?
Exactly. And we feel the same way about biochar, Russ. Like you know, biochar is not a political issue. It is a way to solve a multitude of problems that we are seeing across the United States. And we're a huge country. We have vast resources of biogenic feedstocks that need to be utilized as a manufacturing input. And it can do a variety of things. Certainly it can do things on the agricultural side, but it has a lot of other possibilities, and that this leads us into the main course of our conversation, where we're going to talk a little bit about phytoremediation and pyrolysis of contaminated biomass. So for folks that are joining us, um, hemp is a plant that is very capable of extracting heavy metals and pollutants, other toxic sources from degraded soils. And pyrolysis of these materials provides a permanent stabilization pathway for that contaminated biomass. So, Laura, I remember our very first conversation where you were talking about this, and my mind was just spinning. Teeing you up here, phytoremediation, it's one of hemp's greatest superpowers, I think, in a lot of ways. But obviously, there's been historical concerns around what do you do with this contaminated biomass afterwards. We at USBC, obviously representing the biochar side of this conversation, think that it is really a game changer when it comes to cleaning up or processing these materials and helping to clear up these toxic sites. But I'd love to put the baton in your hands to talk a little bit more about what you guys are doing with phytoremediation and how you see biochar helping in that type of a circumstance.
Well, thank you. I think that this is kind of the dream of what we see hemp being able to do. I mean, it's very, how common is it you have this commodity that becomes legal in our timeline, and then it actually can clean up the historical damage we've done to the world around us. So this is where we can clean up kind of the past and pull things out because it is so fast growing and so thirsty for heavy metals and things. I mean, it really does pull those things out. When we went down the path of looking at uranium sites and cleaning those up, we have a ton of those out on tribal lands here in Arizona, and that land becomes unusable because there's uranium in it. So we looked into having hemp out there and pulling it out, but then what do you do with this, the plant material as it becomes contaminated? You don't want that getting out into the system, so you're basically pulling it out of the ground and just putting it everywhere. So knowing that the burning of it can take apart those things. I mean, uranium is going to be back in its same form. It never changes form. So I get that. Maybe not the most practical use for that, but PFABs and other things, it is really,
Yep.
really great for because we can get rid of those forever chemicals forever. And I think that that's something we didn't know before or understand the need for it as much. So for us, we see hemp as just a really good fit here. And when we look into how do we use it and clean up areas, spill sites, things like that, seed costs are way too expensive right now to make that realistic. So part of the research we're doing is how can we create a plant with a deep root system to help get to the lower areas of contaminated soils and pull that out. And then we can, essentially harvest that and burn that without creating another problem. So
Right.
we're looking to that. We have a huge need though. I mean, I know, like I said before, we have so many areas to clean up, but those areas would become, over time usable to plant on again. That is the goal. And so the soil health, in the surrounding areas, I mean, it cleans water and air and things like that as well. So it's really truly a sustainable plant. And there's other plants that you can go in and remediate with, but there's other limitations there as well. We feel like hemp is a really strong, and it really is a strong plant as well. So we kind of joke about how difficult policy and challenges are there to navigate, but hemp is so strong and worth that fight that we'll continue, because we do think the future is what we're looking towards, and that's what we're cleaning up and trying to figure out how best to do it in a sustainable way. So I don't know if that answered, some of
No, it
that
does.
question
It
there.
does. And I'd love to toss the baton over to Sully. Are there any current like regulatory or legislative concerns about utilizing hemp in this way as a phytoremediator and then pyrolysizing? And just as a little note, we don't like to say burn in the biochar world
Oh,
because if you're putting in a pyrolysis unit, there should be little to no oxygen, and when
got
that's
it.
the case, and this really comes down to also when you're having conversations with regulators, right? Like we literally just got out of the incineration bucket at the national EPA level. We're
Well, I
no
don't want
longer
to put us back there.
yeah, exactly. So don't put us on that timeout box, Laura. There we
Yeah,
go.
excuse me. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. But Sully, any regulatory or any concerns on the regulatory side of doing, this kind of process of phytoremediation? Anything that we should be flagging?
Yeah, as far as I know, there's no regulation at all around biochar. There's no regulation saying you can do it, you can't do it. There's no that it really isn't there at all. And for example, here in Arizona, we educate our Department of Ag about biochar. So I think part of the thing is the conversations really haven't been happening
Yeah.
at the legislative level for just a lot of reasons. I mean, hemp is in its infancy in certain ways with the 2018 Farm Bill and with in its infancy in certain ways as we haven't unlocked it yet, but also hemp's been around for a very long time. We're just sort of, as a country, relearning it, right?
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
exactly, yeah. And so the legislators are relearning it too, right? And so
Yeah.
that's
And biochar has been around for a very long time as well, right? Since basically, time immortal with making a pit and utilizing that biomass. But you in industrial scale, and utilizing the two various different the processes of phytoremediation and utilizing the biochar product, those are, I think, a new world for a lot of regulators. And so they're kind of catching up. I think it behooves organizations like ours to work with those regulators and legislators to try to educate them and frame the conversation so that they go into it well informed and hopefully are opening up opportunities rather than slamming doors shut, so to speak. So.
right, yeah, and I think as speaking from a trade association point of view, a big part of our purpose is education, right? I'm not only educating farmers through our research, but educating legislators and regulatory agencies. And so a lot of them, let's say the regulators and the legislators, the topic of hemp is new to them, period, right? And so we have to start off with, what is industrial hemp? Page
Right.
one, Hemp 101. And so the biochar conversation is now starting to enter into our conversations as we educate policymakers and regulators. For example, with our Department of Ag here in Arizona, they helped us. We collaborated to figure out a solution, which is what do we do with biomass that's non-compliant? And for those that don't know on the call, compliant in the hemp world, the 2018 Farm Bill says that industrial hemp cannot be more than 0.3% Delta 9 THC on a dry weight basis. Basically, they're trying to not to have anything above that percentage, 0.3%, is considered cannabis or marijuana is the term,
Right.
right? And so for it to be hemp, we have to be below that number. So in 2019, when I talked about we had 3,500 acres grown, 41% had to be burned due to non-compliance from being over 0.3%. What we learned in that year is, and we've learned in the past in other states as well, but we really learned it here in Arizona in a hard way, which is the heat stresses out the plant. And when the hemp plant gets stressed, it increases in its THC level.
Yeah.
And so that was a really tough year for the hemp industry in Arizona, period. It was sort of like the beginning and the end almost all at the same time. But in speaking with the Department of Ag on our research project over the last couple of years, we talked about that 41%. And we talked about, our conversations with Marine and the US Biochar Coalition, and which is why these types of conversations and alliances are so important, is that our conversations here with Maria and the USBC led us to speak to our Department of Ag about the idea of if it goes non-compliant, can we turn that into biochar? And they said,
Right.
yeah, I don't see why not. So wow, all of a sudden now we have a whole new pathway in Arizona to solve that problem of non-compliance. Now, like Laura mentioned, the genetics are a big part of what we're trying to get into the right place, right? Because there's not the genetics really need to be adapted to different regions. And so part of our research
Yeah.
project over the 5-year research project is working with the U of A and some other universities like UC Berkeley to develop genetics that work specifically well in the Arizona desert.
Yeah.
And the people will say, well, the desert must be hard to grow things. Actually, we can grow things here in the desert very well. And the cannabis plant, it thrives in heat in many ways. It sort of evolved from that sort of climate and latitude, longitude. But to kind of circle back to your question, those conversations, which really revolved around education right now.
Yeah.
And if there are any regulations or policies that might be helpful, to the biochar industry in relation to hemp, let's talk about it. Right now there's nothing saying you can't do it. And the Department of Ag said, yeah, here in Arizona, yeah, you could do that, right? So those
Yeah.
conversations are important. So if your members think of things that policy wise might be needed in the hemp world, let us know and we can work on that.
I love it. The partnership is so valuable, I think, to both organizations, and we really look forward to seeing where it continues to grow. Okay, so we are at about 15 minutes out, and we do have a few questions from folks that are on the webinar. And this is actually from a USBC member. I don't know who to address this to, so I'm just going to throw this out here and see if people have a response. So this individual submitting a USDA CIG grant today, focusing on hemp for water sequestration and soil health. Anyone have any preliminary or public data on hemp for soil and water? Biochar will be utilized as well. So a conservation innovation grant is what he's applying for.
I mean, if he wants to reach out and we can talk specifics, I'm always down for that. We've submitted a few over the last couple of years that touch specifically on that. And then, of course, we have a broad repository within kind of internally that we've vetted as well. There's a lot of information that you can pull out there from, everywhere, right? But to actually get the actual vetted information, regionality, some of the nuances that are in there, agronomic and at scale,
Yeah.
I could potentially help, kind of guide and direct that. But I do read that it's today. So if it's
Yeah.
We have to say good
Um,
luck, though. Good luck. We
yeah.
did get a research grant that we worked on. It was awarded just this last month. So we know that the funding is there. They want us to be doing this. So good luck with that. Reach out. We'd love to share, data anytime we can.
Um, Deirdre, perhaps you could drop this USBC members information and make sure that Russ and he can speak to each other. Yeah, it's a little rushed, obviously, but good luck on that. This person's in the southeast of the United States, so
Yeah, I think I saw his name pop up as Zach Farr.
yeah,
We'd love to talk to Zach. We work on grants for HEDA and the NHA, and we work with University of Arizona on grants, and so we can be helpful there. But also, I'm very curious at what his work is. Right? That sounds very interesting. So yes, I'd love to help you on grants. But I really love to know what you're doing. So please reach out to us. I'd love to learn more.
awesome. Thank you guys. All right. Another question. This is coming in actually from somebody from Ghana. And the question is, are there investment opportunities for large-scale hemp biochar production for remediation of gold mine soil? He has successfully completed a field research using sewage sludge biochar to remediate the same soil, and the results were excellent with heavy metal absorption and nutrient replenishment. He's a researcher. So, these guys are obviously doing growing of hemp in this area and then doing, the biochar from that feedstock, that phytoremediation. Are you guys seeing any work in gold in Arizona at all?
We
Laura,
have
go ahead, Laura.
Well, I was just going to say, to put it in perspective, we only have two research entities going on in Arizona right now. We're one of them. So that puts that in perspective on how much we're growing. I know up in Montana, they're doing a lot more acreages than we are and have been processing. So just to answer that, we don't have a big, huge, database to kind of pull this stuff from. So we're really in the early stages. It pulls out heavy metals. I would imagine Arizona, we have a lot of gold in our soils here in areas that can't just be mined out, that could maybe be extracted out. So I would say I'd be open to the research. I can't speak to the investment opportunities. We're trying to get everybody to invest in hemp. We think it's the future. So we want everybody to participate. If you don't know where to put your funds, we have an adopt an acre program that we were doing that you can participate even if you don't touch hemp, aren't in the biochar industry, but want to be involved in some way. You could get behind the research and, feel good
I love that.
about the future.
I love
And
that. Yeah.
excuse me.
A nice way to follow up on this webinar, Laura, might be able to do like a LinkedIn post about it and that opportunity for folks as
I
well.
would absolutely love that. I think this is something unique that no one else has offered yet. So it's a way to get industries to working together. I mean, we truly, like Russ said, we're purple. We want to work
Yep.
with everybody that wants to make this a better place, and these are the ways we can do it.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Agreed.
I'd love to speak to this person from Ghana as well, sort of like the last person had a question. We'd love to learn sort of what they're doing and how we can help. So part of an association's purpose in our mind is, we sit at the nexus of sort of the private industry, the government side of things, and we're sort of there in the middle, right? So we talk to sort of
Yep.
everybody. And so I think one of the purposes of an association is to connect people with the right people. And so I'd
Amen.
love to learn more about the gold mine situation here. We know hemp is used. Laura mentioned uranium we're trying to work with. For example, in Chernobyl, where the nuclear reactor exploded, melted down, excuse me. They've been using hemp there to take the radiation out of the soil, for example. And so there's a lot of things we know, and a lot of things we don't know. And so from an NHA perspective, excuse me, the National Hemp Association, they've done quite a bit of work in Ghana. Now, not in the remediation or the biochar side of things, but in helping to open up the markets, helping to educate the market, and helping to create a pathway where the U.S. can export certain things into Ghana and vice versa. And so, from that perspective, and as the NHA continues its work in Africa this upcoming year, I would love to speak to this person and learn more about the work they're doing and see
Absolutely.
how we
Yeah,
can help
we'll be
them.
able to connect you. That's not a problem,
Right.
Sully. So, all right, we've got another question. And let's see. It says, can you speak about the size of a typical industrial hemp operation in terms of mass of waste, aka biomass generated per year? Is the waste collected at specific times of year or consistently throughout the year? Probably all depends upon where you're growing it. Is there any heat used in hemp processing operations? That might be an opportunity for waste heat utilization.
Yeah, I can run with this. Seems how we're looking directly at this. So our facility right now, we have a 10-acre campus facility where we have a food CGMP pressing for hemp seed cake and oil. And then we have our decortication line on that same campus. And within that, we've modeled and looked at what our co-product streams are, aka what our waste streams are. Some of the margins are very thin on that. And of course, being in Montana, shipping that out, the logistics side of things, it makes it rough. So looking at the potential of taking what we're seeing through our decortication line is roughly 25 to 27% of our overall biomass that we're running. And it's matched pretty much about 25% on the food side as well. So for the grain seed cleaning and pressing as well. So you can kind of scale that up, if you have a 1 or 2 million, pounds of throughput per month of decortication line. If you have 250,000 or 500,000 pounds of grain seed, on the food side, you can kind of utilize that as base numbers. As far as CHP, looking at ORC or what have you for utilization, yeah, that's definitely something I think that most individuals or project developers need to be looking at to kind of make the actual unit economics work. And so again, that's something that we're definitely modeling. We're in a unique position in Montana where our energy grid is tied into more favorable nuances. And so being able to kind of tie in that with solar and CHP, I think definitely makes sense. And then, of course, it also depends upon that balance of what is the actual, degrees that you actually have to pyrolyze at to get a good char with your characterization of your different raw materials, and then what's the resultant CHP that you could grab out of it. And really quick, we hosted two different individuals from Ghana for 18 months that actually came and stayed with us in Fort Benton and
Wow.
back in Ghana, and they've taken their industrial hemp knowledge of everything agronomically and around the way. I would love to put, I think Steve was his name, again, in touch with those individuals, kind of, we believe high tides raises all ships. So.
Fantastic. Well, we've got some follow-up to do to make sure that our panelists can interact with them. Everybody registers, so we should be able to do that without a problem. Thank you guys for being so willing to help out our members, and to more broadly have conversations with people that are, interested in these topics. It it makes me pretty proud to see that all coming together. So, all right. Well, we've got one last question to wrap up our discussion, and this is a little bit. It was a question that I actually had crafted in case nobody asked us any questions, but thankfully there's been a number from our audience, and this is broadly kind of like any type of data or research that you can share on utilizing the biochar hemp, rather the biochar made from hemp, for things like cement or concrete or other industrialized applications, like asphalt is one that we've been seeing a lot of interest in biochar in general. Um, Throwing it out there broadly to the panel, whoever would like to jump in.
Well, I would answer that as far as being proven, there has been several grants given to groups doing research with hempcrete products. I do know that there are folks looking for replacement for Portland cement and different things like that. And so there, I want to encourage everybody to look for the funds if available. You might be surprised with where they're available because we're growing this commodity, to do these other things with it. So, you might find there's a connection to something you hadn't thought of before. So I would say with this, from our perspective as an association, we're going after more grant funds to help companies and folks that are needing to do the research to prove these models or to prove their ideas out. I mean, that is what we're here for, to help them find the right partnerships, the right people, the right funding, and to prove these ideas. We would love to see, biochar work into cement and asphalt and those things in an economical way that makes sense. So I will just say that. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add.
Are there any industry reports that we would be able to point to
I have
as of
not heard
yet?
of any group specifically using biochar in cement yet, but that could just be my limited view. I will definitely do some research on this from here, though. And
Yeah, and I think particularly they're interested in the hempcrete idea, right? Like
yeah,
the
because you're sequestering the carbon, and so essentially the carbon is going to be stored for almost ever, ideally.
forever. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And
So
you're also decreasing the off gases for
mhm.
the actual production. And from what I have understood is that the product itself is improved in durability, etc., as a result of utilizing the product. So, um, all right, we are actually well. I fear that if I ask this last question, that we will be over time, but I'll just throw it out here. I heard from a Colorado biochar leader, his company would not pyrolyze hemp because of the high silica level, which has the potential to cause ciliosis, which is terminal. Is simply an issue using the right pyrolysis kiln for the right feedstock?
This is something that I think came up 3.5, 4 years ago when we were looking at this. And this unfortunately was kind of a prevailing comment that made its way into any of the pyrolysis with industrial hemp side of things. So again,
Mm,
I think it's understanding, what material of industrial hemp are we talking about that actually is causing that at what temperatures? And then, of course, what applications, right? We're just talking about hempcrete, we're talking about concrete and Portland cement right now. In those
right.
cases, silica content could potentially be a value added.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah,
It's
that
really
makes
neat.
perfect sense. It's
But all the more reason that research is so important.
Yes.
Amen. And all the more reason to recognize that it seems like anything that involves a biochar industry, it really a bespoke class of products, right? It all depends upon your inputs, what your inputs are, and it doesn't mean if it's one part of the hemp plant, right? You can have multiple different parts of the hemp plant, and it also depends upon your actual manufacturing technique, if you're utilizing pyrolysis, what the temperatures are, etc. So a lot more to learn, a lot more to be researched for sure. Well, we are at the top of the hour. Laura, Russ, and Sully, thank you so much for your time, for your interest, for your engagement. This makes me just realize how much more work that we have to do, but how much fun we can have doing it. And I really appreciate you joining us for this hour. I hope it was informative and engaging for our members. We will see you again next month in August, right around the corner on August 26th. We will be having a webinar on carbon markets. That's going to be at 8 a.m. Eastern. Please keep an eye on our LinkedIn webpage where we'll have information about registering for that. So thank you all. Have a
Awesome.
great
Thanks for
rest of your
having us,
day.
Doreen. You have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.